I used to believe that nothing important ever happened after midnight. The world becomes quieter, but somehow, the weight of life grows louder. So when my phone rang at 1:43 a.m., I assumed it was a wrong number. Another interruption in a life that had settled into quiet disappointment. I almost didn't answer. I didn't know then that picking up the call would quietly dismantle everything I had built. Not violently, not dramatically, just quietly, piece by piece. I was alone that night. Not the dramatic kind of alone, the kind people notice in movies. The ordinary, invisible kind. Divorced, 42, living in an apartment that still smelled faintly of someone who used to love me. I had grown comfortable with silence. What I hadn't learned was how to stop listening to it. The number on the screen meant nothing to me. No name, no picture, just digits. Digits that were about to change my life. I answered without expectation. The voice that came through wasn't immediately recognizable as human. It was hesitation and breathing and uncertainty compressed into a single moment. It carried a fragility I couldn't ignore. "You answered," she whispered. That's when I realized, this call wasn't meant for me. I could have hung up. I should have. But instead, I stayed. There was no immediate connection, no spark, no story unfolding. Just a presence. Just a fragile life on the other end of the line. I learned her name over time. Lena. She never introduced herself directly. It slipped out naturally, like one of those small truths you can't hide if you feel safe. She thought she was calling someone she once loved. Someone who had promised her permanence, only to quietly disappear. I had been that man once. Just not to her. And yet, somehow, I had stepped into that space. Into a life that wasn't mine. I didn't become her replacement overnight. At first, I was just a listener. A steady voice in the dark. The man who stayed when no one else did. And that, at first, was enough. The calls became a routine. Not romantic, not flirtatious. Just necessary. A lifeline. She didn't fall for my voice. She fell for my consistency. And I fell for the feeling of being needed again. That's the most dangerous feeling a lonely man can have. After a few nights, I began to notice the patterns. The way she paused before speaking, as if measuring every word. The subtle tremble in her voice, only noticeable if you were paying attention. The sighs she didn't try to hide. I started learning her life through fragments. Not through dates or names, but through emotions. The quiet desperation of someone who had once trusted and been abandoned. The kind of loneliness that doesn't make noise, but fills every corner of a person's existence. She had loved someone once, she told me. Not casually, not fleetingly, but completely. And then, without warning, he left. I listened, quietly, as she recounted it in pieces. She never cried. She didn't need to. Her sadness was a weight I could feel. It pressed against me through the phone line, settling into the space where I lived. I realized, slowly, that I was falling. Not for her story, not for the voice, but for the way she existed in the world. For the honesty she carried quietly, without ceremony or self-pity. At first, I tried to maintain distance. I reminded myself that I wasn't him. I wasn't the man she was looking for. I couldn't replace the past. I shouldn't even try. But night after night, I answered the call. Because staying was easier than pretending I didn't care. Because in some strange way, she reminded me of who I had once wanted to be. Before life had taught me caution. Before silence had become my default companion. Some nights, I would hang up and stare at the ceiling, thinking about her. Not the woman she was in her life, but the way she existed through the phone, raw and unfiltered. I hadn't realized it, but I was awake for her more than for myself. And then one night, she said something that made my heart catch. "I don't want anyone else," she whispered. "I just want someone who will stay." I wanted to tell her that I was not that man. That I was a stranger who had only shown up at the right time. But the words didn't come. Because somehow, staying on the line felt like the only thing I could do to matter. Weeks passed. Each night became a ritual, a shared silence with occasional words, laughter, or sighs. The phone became more than a connection, it became a space where life existed differently. Where I was allowed to care again. Where she was allowed to trust. And then, inevitably, the fear started to creep in. Because the more I stayed, the more I realized that life outside this small world existed. A world where I had responsibilities, a job, a life that demanded attention. And the risk of losing this quiet bond, if revealed, terrified me. I kept it a secret. The late nights, the longing, the fact that a stranger's presence had begun to matter more than the predictable stability I had clung to. And slowly, I stopped thinking about the wrong number. About how this call was not meant for me. It didn't matter anymore. Because by staying, I had made it mine. I never expected a phone call to change my life. Yet here I was, months into this routine, and I could feel its weight pressing on me. The late-night calls had become a lifeline, but also a quiet trap. I had begun prioritizing her presence over everything else. Work deadlines blurred, friends' invitations were ignored, even my own well-being was sacrificed for those few hours of conversation. And then it happened. One afternoon, a letter arrived from work. An internal audit, a warning, a note about excessive personal phone usage affecting performance. I should have panicked. I should have hung up the phone that night and returned to normal. But I didn't, because by that point, I realized something terrifying. I had no intention of returning to normal. This bond, the quiet, invisible connection, had already embedded itself deep inside me. It wasn't just her anymore. It was the part of me I had forgotten. The man who could care, who could feel, who could let someone in. I was terrified that losing her would reveal the emptiness I had been hiding from the world. That the safety I found in these calls was all I had left. So I stayed, and in staying, I paid a price. The suspension notice came weeks later. My job, the one that defined me, the one that kept me safe, was gone. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting or betrayal, just an empty inbox and the quiet echo of my own choices. I could have blamed her. I could have hated the wrong number. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew it wasn't her fault. It was mine, for answering, for staying, for allowing myself to care so deeply again. And yet, despite everything, the calls continued. Every night, every word, every sigh, every pause tethered me to her more tightly. I began to realize something profound. Love is rarely convenient. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care if your life is in order. It arrives quietly, unannounced, and demands a choice. I had made mine. I thought about all the moments I had lost in life. The relationships I had ignored. The chances I had let slip by because I was too cautious. And now, here she was, a stranger, teaching me again how to feel. How to care, how to risk. And I realized that sometimes, the cost of love isn't measured in money or comfort. It's measured in courage. Courage to answer the call. Courage to stay when it's easier to leave. Courage to accept the consequences of letting someone in. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, not because of regret, but because I understood the magnitude of what I had done. One phone call, one choice, and everything, my stability, my life, my past, was altered forever. Yet even in that fear, even in that loss, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Because love had returned to my life. Not loud, not flashy, just quietly, insistently, impossibly. The day we decided to meet arrived quietly, almost unremarkably. No dramatic fanfare, no carefully chosen words, just a simple agreement that we would see each other. I was terrified, not of her, not of the conversation, but of the truth, mine and hers. Months of voice, of pauses, of shared confessions had built a fragile world. And now it stood on the edge of reality. I arrived early, as if being punctual could somehow control fate. The cafe smelled faintly of coffee and old books. She was there, already, sitting with her hands folded, looking both nervous and composed. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I realized I had been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. Waiting for the instant when the intangible connection became something real. She stood, and we approached each other slowly, cautiously. No dramatic gestures, no rushed confessions, just two humans, facing months of unseen intimacy, now embodied in a single fragile presence. I had to tell her. I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I was not the man she thought I was when she first called. I had never been him. And yet, standing there, looking at her, I realized the man I had become during those months mattered more than any past identity. The choices I had made to stay, to listen, to care, these defined me now. I'm not him, I said quietly. Not the one you were hoping to reach. But I stayed, because I wanted to. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't look angry. Instead, she smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile. Then that's enough, she said. I don't care who you were. I only care that you were here. I felt a wave of relief and fear wash over me simultaneously. Relief, because she understood the risk I had taken. Fear, because life had a way of testing happiness, especially when it arrived quietly. We sat, we talked, we didn't rush through the conversation. We explored the months of shared voices, confessions, and fears. Every pause, every detail, every tiny laugh was magnified in the quiet cafe, making the invisible months tangible. And then, inevitably, the question lingered. What now? I realized there was no scripted answer. No perfect next step. All that existed was this moment, and the choice to embrace it fully, without regret, without hesitation. I reached for her hand. A small gesture, yet the weight of it carried all the nights, all the calls, all the uncertainty. She didn't pull away. Her fingers laced through mine naturally, like it had always been meant to happen. And in that touch, the months of longing, fear, and hope collapsed into a single truth. Love is never convenient. Love is never easy. It is earned through presence, choice, and courage. We left the cafe slowly. No grand declarations, no promises that couldn't be kept. Just two people stepping into a future they were willing to face together. After that day, life didn't suddenly become perfect. We didn't run into sunsets holding hands. We didn't resolve everything with a single conversation. But something had shifted. The invisible weight of silence, loneliness, and missed chances had lifted. We were present, truly present, in a way I hadn't been in years. I began to understand that love isn't about the dramatic moments, the fireworks, or the perfect timing. It's about showing up, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's messy, even when it costs you something. Answering that phone call had cost me my job, my routine, and the illusion of control I had built around my life. But it gave me something far more precious: the chance to feel again, to care again, to be chosen, and to choose someone back. Sometimes I think about that first night. 1:43 a.m. The wrong number. The uncertainty that could have ended everything if I had turned away. And I realize now that life's most meaningful moments often arrive quietly, in the smallest, least expected ways. Lena didn't need me to be anyone but myself. And I didn't need to be anyone but present. There is courage in simplicity. There is bravery in listening. There is love in staying. We walk forward, cautiously, imperfectly, but together. Because love is rarely perfect. But it is always real when it chooses you. Life rarely gives second chances in big, obvious packages. It gives them in quiet moments. A phone call, a voice in the dark, a choice to stay, even when the world asks you to leave. And sometimes, if you are brave enough, that choice changes everything. If this story stayed with you, leave a like. And if you believe that real love is about courage, presence, and choice, subscribe for more stories like this.